Welcome to Full Sail Partners Live. My name is Sarah Ganella. I am one of the four partners at Full Sail Partners, and we are so glad you are joining us today. A couple of months ago, we discussed rolling out your CRM system, but today we are going to discuss rolling out resource planning. And I have the privilege of having Rana Blair joining us today. And if you don't know Rana, first, where have you been? And second, we want this to be interactive and we want to know that you have joined us. So I thought it might be fun to ask our audience right off the bat, what nickname do you have for Raina? What have you given her in the past? And so for me, over the years, I have heard people refer to Raina as the collaboration queen, the rock star planner. So, what are your nicknames that you have given Raina over the years? And this also will just help us to know that you have joined us today. Raina, I want to let you know that my daughter knows you as the frog lady. I know, but that's a story for a different day, right? And so, welcome, Raina. So, before we get too deep into the conversation today, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background? And for those that haven't met this rock star, who's now formally known as Raina.
So hello, everybody. I am Rana Blair. I have been at Full Sail for just over 9 years, but in the Deltec ecosystem for over 21 years at this point. I am still 29 when you ask my age. I've gone from the Advantage product to the Vision product, and now helping all sorts of firms get to Vantagepoint. And the most amazing part of Vantagepoint, in my opinion, no matter what the CRM specialists say, is actually the planning application. It is so much easier to use. It's so robust. Anybody can plan at any time, and the system has really made it easy for people to do that. So I am still focusing almost entirely on Vantagepoint resource planning and helping get firms to Vantagepoint so that they can use the Vantagepoint resource planning module. So exciting times.
Perfect. We have a lot of people joining us today. And so we have, is it Cinia?
Cinia in
from
Sacramento.
Sacramento. She's in your neck of the woods.
Absolutely.
And Judy says you're definitely a rock star. Lori calls you Awesome Queen.
These are all the public nicknames.
We have Dawn joining us from Wilmington. And we have a LinkedIn user. You do have to give us permission, streamyard.com. I think it might be /LinkedIn for us to see your name, but they're coming from Albany. And we have Diana from Emeryville, California. Someone saying hello, Jason.
Hi, Jason.
And then we have Debbie who's joining us from Colorado. So we have a good group going. And so thank you so much for joining us. And Raina, I thought the first question that we might ask you is, it just might be beneficial for our audience to know, what is resource planning and how can it help project-based firms?
So Vantagepoint resource planning is an integrated tool created for project managers, actually by project managers. And that integrated tool helps us plan the resources on our projects. And the outcome of that is the management of the resources, who's underutilized, who's overutilized. That whole management aspect comes from planning our projects inside of the system. Because you are planning those projects and you have resources and you are planning to the end, you are also getting projections of how you believe your project will perform financially over time. Those of you that have been involved in planning implementations with me will understand that I say planning is a way of life. It is an action word. It is something that we do. And in Vantagepoint resource planning, your responses to changes in scope, schedule, budget, even your team considerations, how they're working together, it is very simple to update your project plan and those projections to tell the story as you were experiencing it today. I still love the tool. I loved it back in the other software. I love it even more now because it is accessible to every single firm of every size.
Great. All right. I'm just going to point out a couple more people that have joined. So Casey San Jose, she said Rana is the best.
She's just
We have
buttering me up.
Yep, Jonathan from Baton Rouge, great. We got some people down south. We have someone from Charlotte, so Connie. Kate's super excited about joining us today. We have Tammy in Nashville, and then we have Michael from Nashville as well. So we have a large group today. So thank you guys. And so when firms are looking to implement and roll out resource planning, I know you have identified three key areas that firms should look at. Can you give us sort of a 10,000-foot view of what those three areas should be or what people should consider when implementing resource planning?
Okay. There's really three phases and some key ideas to think about within those three phases. One is getting prepared before you actually get started in the implementation. We're looking at some of the foundation concepts that planning is reliant on, concepts such as employee utilization, how you expect your individuals to be utilized or scheduled over time, how you even set up your projects, how you're using the CRM module if you have that installed. And then there is the actual implementation. This is the part of the process where we are actually putting together the business process as it applies to your firm for use of the tool. There is the team that you've had assembled. You want to make sure that you have the right people, some doers, some overseers, some decision makers, because this team is deciding how to use the tool for the rest of the firm. You want some commitments from those individuals, understanding that we have to have consistent processes. We're all trying to move in the same direction, and therefore there is some documentation, some changes sometimes to the current processes, and all of this is to work together to use the tool. And then there's after you have considered yourself to go live on the Vantagepoint resource planning tool. We're going to focus a little bit more on some of the points there, but just understand, because planning is a way of life, it is like picking up a new exercise routine. You've got to do it, and you've got to stay at it through those first painful months or weeks if you're really, really great. And you have to keep pushing. And we'll talk about more of those there.
Okay. So you have the three areas are you got to think about like what you actually want to do. So before you even implement, what is your purpose? And then you talked about during. So during the implementation, the team, the metrics that you're wanting, but you're thinking about that beforehand, but you're actually going through what that process is during. And now we're going to be talking about the go live. So those first two areas, we actually are going to have a future blog that we're going to talk about before and during the implementation. But today we're going to really concentrate on the rollout or the going live part. So when firms are looking at rolling out resource planning to the rest of the company, you now configured it, you figured out exactly what's important to your firm. What do you do? What are sort of the do's and don'ts that you have found to help make a successful rollout of resource planning?
Okay, so the opposite of everything I say is going to be a don't, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through. The first thing that you must do is you must reaffirm that commitment. This is in the hands of the firm leadership, making resource planning and that way of life, making it stick. So no excuses, setting a time frame for which all of your projects are going to be in. It is very helpful to say, listen, for the first 2 weeks, we want 50% of the projects in. And by the end of the third week, we want 75%. Create metrics and make sure that firm leadership is actually feeding back with the group on how you're doing. Firm leadership also has to be prepared to counsel and redirect those that are not quite meeting those guides, those deadlines. I cannot say it enough how important the executive sponsorship throughout this process is, but especially when it comes time to go live. It's not enough for individuals to just implement it themselves. We need a little bit of pressure.
Yeah. So let me dig in a little bit before we continue on with it. So the first thing that I heard was no excuses, which is an interesting comment because one of the things I tend to hear is I want it to be easy. Like I want the easy button. I want it to, telepathy, just, it's from my brain and it to to go out there. So I want to talk a little bit about the no excuses.
Okay.
So maybe dig in a little bit more on that part. How can you help people to know or help them to know that why why should we have no excuses? Why is this important type thing?
Well, everyone's busy, right? We're all too busy to do whatever it is we're being asked at any one time. I know I am, right? What's really important is making sure in the earlier phases of this that you have tried to address those excuses, make a list of them. I'm too busy. What that interprets into is I don't believe you that it's this easy to go in and do it, and I am overthinking it. Now, there's a lot of architect and engineer jokes, and in some of our cases, lawyer jokes, or for some of our clients, around overthinking the tool. You want to make sure that the process around using the tool has been simple. You want to make sure that people understand it's not only benefiting the firm, it's actually benefiting them personally. And this is rough to do, but some of those excuses can be resolved with maybe some strictness in how you run the process. For example, if you have individuals that are not planning, they're just not picking it up and running with it, this should have an impact on how resources are assigned to their projects. The last thing that you want to do is let that excuse be rewarded with resources in the time that they want them, even though they haven't planned. There are other things that you want to do when people say, well, I this is just too hard. I've got to do a spreadsheet first, and then I've got to do this. We want to explain to those individuals who are expected to plan, we want to line out very well how the process goes. What happens during the fee proposal process? What happens when we're in the contract negotiations? You want to line out for them what is to happen when. Where you can make that process simpler in terms of the paperwork that they have to do, but also think about the processes around which projects are created in their system. How could you make it better? One of the things that I do with some firms is rather than having project planners start from scratch with every single project plan, we actually give them very well developed templates where all they've got to do is get that record created, make a few adjustments to the information is already there, and then they have a valid plan. So some of the excuses are valid, others of the excuses are just because they don't want to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, one of the other things you talked about is buy-in, and even Diane posted this. Lindsay asked the question that I was asking you, and even
Mhm.
Diana said buy-in from upper management. And so, I think that this is a point that is extremely important, that if your upper management isn't excited about it and they're not understanding the benefit and can't explain why this is a benefit, then a lot of times it goes on deaf ears. So maybe talk a little bit more about how can people get that buy-in, or what is it as an executive you could do to help with getting the buy-in.
Wow. I know we're supposed to talk about the third phase, but that actually starts at the very beginning.
Mm. Okay.
I like the term die-in because buy-in assumes that I'm going to pay for some value, right? And people don't always think of planning that way. We need to fully develop what it is that we're after. What are we seeking to accomplish? In some of my planning implementations, you'll hear me start with the group, even in the demo phase. What is the problem? And
Mhm.
in some groups that are using spreadsheets or other tools, they'll say, well, what's wrong with it? What doesn't it do for you? So having a full understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish sets the stage. And then as we go forward, having that involvement in understanding of the tool. Here's what not to do. Don't involve the executive. We call it the executive sponsor. It's someone from management. And that someone from management has to have the ability to make decisions, but also redirect team members who are not picking this up and running with it, right? There's no influence without power, honestly. And you need to utilize that in your firm. That's why those executives and those managers are there. They need to be involved in this process. They are essentially signing everyone in the firm up for use of this tool. So they have to understand how it works. They have to understand what you click. They don't have to learn it, but they have to understand what it's like technically speaking. And if they don't understand that, they are often led astray by those individuals who have those excuses that say, "This is too much work. I'm too busy." Yeah. So they need to be able with faith and with full understanding, being honest. I've looked at it. I've even made those same clicks myself, and it's not too hard. They need to be able to say that. If they cannot say that, later on, it's going to come to roost they will not support something they themselves don't understand.
Yeah. So, what are some of the other do's and don'ts that people should keep in mind as they're rolling out a system?
I think being realistic with the goals, but actually setting metrics that are really measurable is really, really important. For example, having a clear list of these are the plans that we're going to plan first and setting people after that specific list. It's easier when people know exactly what they're doing. They don't have to think about it. They just get in there and do it. It's also really important to measure how things are going. We've done some dashboards to help you measure just how much throughput you're getting in that plan, measuring the estimate to complete values, watching them go up. If your firm is wanting to plan during the pursuit stage, there's maybe two dashboards that measure the ETC values in the existing opportunity stage projects and in the existing projects that you want to plan that are eligible for a plan. Think about the number of projects that need to have a plan at any time, which ones you are going to plan up front during that very critical phase of the go live, and identify for the individual users which ones you want to see populated first. Start immediately using the information from the system, whether it's full of holes, right? Because you are in a process of implementing. Start using it in your everyday operations. The answer should be pretty standard to any question about resources. I don't know. Let's go look at the plan. You want to practice saying that. You want to reinforce the fact that you're planning to answer those sorts of questions. And so bringing that system up, looking at what's in the plan, and redirecting if there is nothing in the plan is a very important part of this process as well.
Yeah. And so just for the audience, you mentioned ETC. So
Sorry
ETC,
for that.
just to make sure people know, estimate to completion.
Yes.
And so just in case people didn't know that, sometimes I forget we do a lot of acronyms, and sometimes we don't realize people sometimes don't know what those are. So I thought I might mention that. So
Thank you.
as we're thinking about those, we always hear like the Monday planning meetings and things like that. And so I think that's a good place that you can do the same type of thing. So, all right, well, let's get in the plan. So really focusing in on all the things you're currently doing instead, as you suggested, well, let's get into the plan. Let's get into the plan. I like that
Exactly.
suggestion.
Let's go look at the plan. Absolutely. If you have resourcing meetings where you're talking about who's doing what, make sure that the resource management view is up on the screen, front and center. At first, you're going to probably slow the meeting down as people say, "Oh, I didn't do my plan. Let me go do that real quick," right? And they're reloading of the screens. But you want to put that pressure on. Most of the people will go easily. They'll put in the plans. They'll get them all done. They'll be superstars.
Mhm.
Probably 20% of the people, they'll eventually get there, but they're needing some poking and some prodding. And then maybe 20 or 10% of the people, they just they know they need to, they understand it. There's actually no question. They just haven't gotten it into their lives. Here's what happens when you start always referring back to these plans. Most of that 10% doesn't want to be called out in public. And
Mm,
you actually have to make sure that you are in front of everybody mentioning the fact that the planning should be done. You may have to say it like a broken record over and over again, but because you have that information in front of you, you can see where there are gaps and making sure that you're redirecting those people. Most of them get tired of being a little bit embarrassed in front of the group every weekly or biweekly meeting, and they'll at least get their plans in and updated the Friday before, or potentially 10 minutes before the meeting. And then they'll get better and better at it once they start getting to that point. Now, there
yeah.
are some there are some people that just never will, and you need to understand in advance what to do with those individuals. I've just now started asking the question up front during the initial stages of the implementation, what are you going to do with the people that simply will not comply? What is your plan B? And we discuss that up front to make sure that we have coverage. We don't want to send messages where if you're person A, yeah, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. That will tear it down very quickly.
Right. I also know that one of the other areas, so there's while a project has been awarded, but this can be done on the opportunity side as well. And that's a really great place to start potential project as well. Correct?
100%. And in fact, we've had several clients that have finally decided to purchase the CRM module just so they can plan their projects while they're in pursuit. We've had some firms go as far to say as, listen, in order for a potential project to pass the go no go stage, it has to have a fully loaded plan so that we can see whether or not we can commit to actually doing the work. There's nothing worse than committing to something that you don't have enough resources to do, and then everybody's life is miserable for 6 months or even 18 months. It is amazing to plan while in pursuit, and with just a little bit of consulting, or probably at this point, just asking others in the audience what they're doing, you can set up a process that gives, at the moment that record is put into the system, you can have the record, the work breakdown structure, the plan, the resources, and the dates. All of that information can be done in less than 5 minutes if you do this very, very well. Some of you have seen Myrena's give me 7 minutes and I will create a brand new pipeline project, enter in all my requirement information, get the plan going, get really good information in the system, and show you how that represents in the resource management. I commit to it. That's what we have to be able to do to sort of remove those excuses for, well, I don't have time, right? We make it as easy and as streamlined as possible.
Perfect. I like that. It was interesting. I had a conversation the other day with an individual that said they want it to be easy, and so I had them to define. Okay, well, what is easy? So right now, it is taking you how long to be able to see this information in Excel or whatever it might be. Would you anticipate that it would take you the same amount of time or more time to get visibility to things that you're not getting today? And it sort of stopped them and made them think a little bit about, okay, well, I hope that it might take as long as it is today, but yes, I understand it might take a little bit more. So I think that it's also a really about perception, how you go into things. If you
Mhm.
think it's going to be hard, if you think it's going to be a lot of work, if you think all of these things, it absolutely will be.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I have gone as far as to time individuals doing the work in the other system or the spreadsheets,
Hmm.
um, and then have them, while they're still learning, complete those very same actions in the integrated tool. Here's what's interesting, it may take the same or even a little less time. But
Mm-hmm.
with the time invested, you're getting so much more out of it. There are plenty of firms that have two spreadsheets, one for the tactical that's 4 to 6 weeks. They've got another one that has the pipeline projects in it. The two spreadsheets don't talk to each other. They're reviewing multiple things inside of the software. And so it's not just how long it takes you, but what do you get out of the time that you spend? And because
Exactly.
this is integrated, one piece of information is represented in a variety of ways. Part of having the Vantagepoint planning and potentially the Vantagepoint CRM is kind of that cohesion. We are all now working around a single record. We're not having information stores in different places. We're all talking about the same thing with different topic sentences. We've got one pipeline project. Some are talking about the resources, some are talking about the pricing, some are talking about the competition and the likelihood of win. But
Mhm.
having all that in the conversation in one place saves time as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed. If anybody has any questions for Raina, please add them into the chat, and we would be glad to answer them. And so, Raina, I want to be mindful today. We were actually, I think, only setting aside about 30 minutes. So we have about 4 minutes left of our time here. And so, any other key areas that you think might be important for people to keep in mind as they're thinking about those do's and don'ts of rolling out a resource planning system?
I say giving yourself time to do well in this process. We can train people on how to use planning, right, in minutes. The learning curve is very flat and very short. But all of the business process around your projects is what's up for discussion. It's not just the resource plans, it's how you measure the pipeline. We can't avoid that conversation. How
Mhm.
you create projects in the system. We can't avoid that conversation. How we're going to divide the work of who's managing those resources. Are there any changes to how we have our system configured that are coming on account of having this Vantagepoint planning tool on implementing it? So you've got to give yourself enough time to accomplish all of the things that we could predict and some of those things that were unpredicted as far as what we needed to configure the system. One great example of that is I have a lot of firms that still don't use the work breakdown structure. Well, it makes it very difficult to plan
Mm.
without that work breakdown structure because the Gantt chart feature is very powerful when you have phases of work. So that's the type of thing that we need a little time to implement and get started well before we go live.
Yeah. So we do have a question that came in, and real quick, Diane just wanted to say hi, Raina.
Hi,
Uh, and so, but we have a question from Joy. She said, "Hi, Raina. In the pursuit stage, do you recommend planning on the regular project or the overhead project?
You
Is
always want to plan the regular project. There is no way to transfer.
okay.
You want people to
Mm,
be planning the project that you're going to win, and it's the same record and project plan that you are using during execution, and it's the same project plan record that you're evaluating at closeout.
perfect. We have another question. This is probably for me. Do you need a license for every employee in the resource management module? If you want them to access it and see resources and things like that, then yes, they would need a license.
Yeah, there are some fuzzy areas in Vantagepoint around that. There's some advanced tools that absolutely require a license,
Mhm.
but you can use planning at a very, very basic level without the planning reports and some of the resource management tools. You can actually use that without a license.
Yeah, and maybe, Lindsay can go find that blog that you did.
Yeah.
So there was a blog that Raina did that was talking about if you have Vantage Point back office, there's lots of capabilities that are related to planning out a project and assigning resources and things like that. It's more the resource allocation side, the Gantt chart, and some of the more advanced features that have to do with resource planning. And so maybe if Lindsay's able to find that, she can post that in there to help people. So, all right,
Plenty
we got
for
some
everyone.
Yeah, we got some more questions coming in. Have any of your clients quantified their return on investment for implementing resource planning?
Jonathan, I am sure they have.
I
The
have before. We had clients that have done that previously.
Yeah. Back in Vision days, the cost to implement the planning application was quite steep. So it wasn't accessible for everyone. But with the Vantage Point planning, that is considerably less amount of time, less amount of dollars for consulting. And I think what's happening lately is there are firms that never had anything other than that annoying feeling like resources are out of control. I'm not going to say that planning saves you any money. It certainly does give you a peace of mind, and that is worth whatever dollar value you ascribe to it.
All right. And then I think you sort of answered his next question as well. And so here's the blog. Just so you guys know, Lindsay has posted that. So it was no cost, no catch, no way, discover the truth about Deltek Vantage Point planning. And so it had information in there about how you can utilize some of the capabilities that are already there for planning at no additional cost, and then how you can take it to the next level.
That
And
was my
so,
silly blog, my
yeah.
the infomercial.
Well, if we have any other questions, go ahead and add those into the chat. And so, Raina, one of the things we haven't talked about, maybe we could wrap this up. Training wasn't really discussed, I guess, in a straight manner, but
Mhm.
training is really during the implementation process. But then you also have the consistency aspect that's sort of after. So maybe talk a little bit more about thinking about the ongoing training. What should people keep in mind?
I always like to have a super user group. These are people that have trained alongside with all the other users, but they have a particular interest in going deeper in some of the tools. They're willing to use some of that deep advanced functionality. These are also the individuals that we assign the job of onboarding new users, either people that have suddenly become planners or new staff in the firm, to making sure that they're onboarded with the same business process as all of the others that were there when you went live, and then having that same group of individuals keep up with the new functionality in planning. Twice a year with Vantage Point, you're going to get something new. So you need a group whose job it is to keep it up. And then of course, contact consulting when there's sometimes we drop one of the tools, or we choose not to use it, and then we want to. So having a group that's always looking for more, making sure that it gets better and better, and then training everyone as they come into the firm or come into that position is part of it.
Great. And talking about getting better and better, Raina has authored several great blogs and also past. If you go look at our mini demonstrations as well, Raina has done several of those. And I also did want to go back to a comment, if I can find it, that someone else had posted up here. Terry called you out. She said, I would call Raina one of my best mentors. I can't absorb enough from her. And
I'll
so,
Venmo you, Terry. Thanks.
perfect. And so, well, thank you so much, Raina, for the insight today. I'm going to wrap it up with Amy West. She said, looking forward to working with you and getting us up and running. And if people have not taken advantage of you, I would say, be sure to go to our website and connect. And Terry is also a resource planning guru as well. She's continued to learn from Raina and has been doing a lot of implementations as well. And so it looks like we have a couple more people just had some comments. I'm excited to get working with you, Raina. And then Kathy is asking, is this being recorded for later? Yes, it'll immediately be available on LinkedIn and also YouTube. And so the replay is immediately available once this is done. And so, Raina, any final thoughts you might want to leave people with?
Oh, final thoughts. Do they have to be on planning?
You know what? Whatever you think might help people in
Okay.
life.
Vantagepoint planning, Vantagepoint finance, CRM. Don't be afraid to try new things. Got one of us on a phone call. Let's talk about the things that you have often wondered about and want to use. Don't let enough be enough. There's always a better way to do it, smarter, faster, all of that. So feel free to reach out to us.
Perfect. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Raina, for joining us today. Thank you, Lindsay, for taking care of everything in the background for us and getting those resources for us. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope that the information that Raina shared provided value to you, and feel free to reach out to us. We look forward to connecting.
See you all soon.
Thank you.